Okay. Are you guys ready for the first session? Yes, I know you're ready. Okay. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first conference session, Well-Being at Work, Resilience, Not Burnout, featuring Jen Fisher and Dr. Cree Scott. Anybody a little burnout? Okay. Just speaking for myself, asking for a friend. Okay, Jen was the first Chief Wellbeing Officer of a professional services organization, a leading voice on well-being and human stability, and the co-author of the best-selling and award-winning book, Work Better Together, How to Cultivate Strong Relationships to Maximize Well-Being and Boost Bottom Lines. Dr. Scott is the founder and CEO of Serenity Psy Consulting, where she uses evidence-based adult learning practices to engage participants and translate complex ideas into actionable strategies. Please welcome Jen Fisher and Dr. Cree Scott to the stage.
That's how I feel right now. Oh, I've been so down and under pressure. I'm way too fine to be this stressed, yeah. Oh, not the girl I was or you.
Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Come on, you can do a little better. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? You're not burnt out, are you? Well, I'm Jen Fisher.
And I am Cree Scott. And what we're going to be talking about today is burnout and connection. And what many people believe about burnout is that it's just about exhaustion. But what we're here to talk about today is that it's much more than just being exhausted. It's all about disconnect. It's a disconnect to yourself and a disconnect to others. And so speaking of connection, Jen and I share a very special connection story. And we really want to talk about how connection was reigniting our path during those life challenges. So Jen, would you like to share our story of connection?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have my note cards because this is the first time that I share somewhat of an emotional story between Cree and I and how we became connected. In 2016, I was diagnosed with cancer. And a mutual colleague of Cree and mine at work suggested that I connect with Cree because she had been through something similar and was a recent survivor. And that connection now has become a really amazing friendship and partnership and collaboration. But when I reflect back on that time and all of the fears that existed when you get diagnosed with cancer, one of the resounding fears was my hesitation to be vulnerable, my hesitation to tell other people, especially in the workplace, that I had been diagnosed with cancer, because I think, like so many of us women in this room, we are taught to believe, or we just have this internal narrative that we need to show up and always be perfect and not show flaws and essentially be flawless. And so this pressure to appear flawless was something that I was carrying with me. And I was just stepping into my role as the Chief Wellbeing Officer at Deloitte. And so I was really afraid that, other people would judge me, not because they were judging me, but because my own internal narrative was telling me that they would judge me and that they would think that I wasn't capable of doing the job that I had just been given. And so, I think that the reason we're talking about connection and burnout, as Cree said, is that so much of these beliefs that we carry around with us are oftentimes what contribute to or what lead to our burnout, because we're not connecting with other humans on a really human level. And, and so we show up and we're covering or pretending to have it all together all the time when we really don't. And so that first connection with Cree, when I opened up to her, it was genuine, it was human. She shared her story, and it was her willingness to share her own cancer journey so openly with me that really helped me discover why connection in the workplace is so important. And that connection in the workplace isn't just about our professional collaborations with one another, that actually connection in the workplace comes from those times when you kind of almost those times in between the professional collaborations when you're interacting with one another as humans. And so what we're going to talk about today is how this authentic connection with other human beings in the workplace and also more generally in our life is one of the strongest ways that we can shield against burnout in our lives.
Absolutely. Yeah, and actually what we want to do is share some stats, but I need to go and grab the clicker, so let me just get that for you.
And so for everybody asking while she does this, yes, the shoes are definitely more comfortable than regular heels. I'll get that out of the way right now. I don't know that I'd run around in them for 9 hours a day, but they're definitely more comfortable and they're a lot of fun.
And they're cute, right? So all of us have probably experienced stress at some point in our lives. Raise your hand if you experience stress. All right, so we're all in this together. So this is a safe space, and we're gonna have you talk about it a little later. But what we know is that women tend to experience stress much more than men do, right? And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. But one of the things that we found through research with McKinsey, LinkedIn, Healthline is that 42% of women will experience stress at some point in time in their lives, while only 35% of men will experience stress. And again, we'll talk about why, right? And then 74% of women said that they are stressed when they're at work. That's a high number, 74%. Can anybody relate to that, being stressed at work? And then 88% of women believe that stress impacts their physical health. And so we know that stress can manifest in a lot of different ways. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But one of the biggest things that happens is that we do not recognize that we're stressed. We're in it, especially our high performers. And I know we have a lot of high performers in the audience. I've met several yesterday. So when you are such high performers and you're just going from one thing to the other, what tends to happen is you can get stressed, but it can be unyielding. And so if you're not checking in to see, hey, my body is feeling a little something different or I'm off, then it can become burnout and it can lead to burnout. So we're gonna talk about when stress actually moves from just simply stress to burnout. So we're gonna go ahead and get Jen to tell us a little bit about her story, specifically as it relates to burnout. And your story is very interesting and intriguing.
We're entering the therapist office.
I
here,
know,
yes.
that's right. So Jen, can you describe a time in which you were burned out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent 23 years of my career at Deloitte. I see the Deloitte table over there. So, hey, friends. And about 10 years ago, I started in the organization in marketing, and I did marketing for several of our businesses and industries. And then from there, I went on to be the chief of staff for our COO, who later became our CEO. And for anybody that aspires to or has been in a chief of staff role, let's talk. It's an incredible role, but it's also incredibly intense and probably one that has, well, definitely one that has very little well-being associated with it. The truth is when I came out of that role, I was pretty lost. I was burnt out or experiencing burnout, but I didn't know that I was experiencing burnout. So I didn't have the capacity or real ability to decide what was next for me in my career. So I went back into our marketing organization because that was what I knew. And I had the incredible fortune, which I didn't realize at the time, to end up working for a leader at Deloitte who saw me and saw my potential, but also saw how much that I was struggling. And she sat me down and she said, you're really struggling and it's showing up in your work. I'm sure it's showing up in your life. You need to take some time off. You need to, you've given a lot, like you've given so much to this organization. It's time for you to focus on you for a while. Now, for those of you that are high performers, or if you're anything like me, when somebody else sees that you're struggling or tells you that you're struggling, your reaction is, oh my God, this is the worst thing. This is the worst thing ever. I processed it as failure. I didn't process it as, wow, I have this incredible leader that sees that I'm struggling and is trying to create this space for me to get healthy and well. So I did take time off because I really didn't have a choice. I needed to. And I focused on getting myself healthy and well, both mentally. I was struggling with my mental health and also physically. And in doing that, I think in many ways kind of reignited a passion that I had had my whole life for this topic of well-being. But my definition of well-being at the time was, I'm gonna get to the gym for an hour a day. It didn't matter if I slept 2 hours, worked 22 hours, like I got to the gym an hour a day, and therefore I was healthy and well. That didn't work for me, obviously. I still burnt out. And so I had to kind of reevaluate all of those things in my life. And I came back to work and I sat down with this same leader and I said, I think I need to leave the organization because I want to focus on helping others, especially women, recognize that you don't have to, we shouldn't accept that burnout is the price that we pay for success. Arianna Huffington says that. And so that was kind of the mission that I wanted to create in my life for myself. And it was this same leader, and I hope that we all end up having a leader like this sometime, at some point in our lives, that said, you're not going anywhere, because if you need this, there's a lot of other people in this organization that need it too. And so she set me down the path of creating a business case for what well-being at Deloitte could and should look like, and creating the role as the organization's first chief well-being officer. So yeah, there's a lot of details in terms of like, what did burnout look like? Did I know I was burning out? And what I will say to that is, I knew there was something wrong. This was 10 years ago. No one was sitting on a stage talking about burnout the way that we are now. And so I knew something was wrong, but I was like, I'm just gonna push through. I'm gonna push through, I'm gonna power through. I'll eventually figure it out. Something will get better. It didn't happen, And so like, what did that look like for me? It affected my sleep. Most importantly, it affected my relationships. I look back at the way that I treated my husband during that time. And like, I remember when I kind of healed and was recovered and felt better, and I looked at him with tears in my eyes and said, like, why are you still married to me? Because it was kind of that extreme in terms of it changed my behavior so much. And so there's a lot of, different ways that these things can show up in your life. But what I would say is that if it's persistent, if it changes who you are, if it changes your relationship with like who and what you like to do, that's a signal that there's a problem, and there's nothing wrong with seeking out the help that you need and doing it early and doing it often. I think everybody should go to therapy, even if you don't think you need it, you should still go to therapy. So, yeah.
So we know that, again, you talked about high performing. So what do you think were some of the factors that contributed to your burnout as hindsight?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think for sure, it was my own beliefs and behaviors around what success looked like. But let me clarify that a little bit more, because my definition of success was actually not my own definition of success. So what I had done was like identified people within our organization or within the world that I perceived to be successful. And I was like, okay, that person's successful, so I'm gonna do what they do. And that person's successful, so I'm gonna do what they do. And I never really said like, okay, well, what does success actually mean for Jen Fisher? And so I was always striving for something that was outside of me or didn't actually feel like me, because I hadn't done the work to really understand what that looked like. So I think that was one of the biggest things, because you're just kind of fighting against this thing that's not you, right?
Someone else's story.
Someone else's story, yeah. And so I think that was part of it. And then I just, like I said before, I was one of those people that was like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I don't have time for sleep. Sleep's for people that don't have the job that I have. I had this view that the work I was doing was so incredibly important. Without me, the whole world would fall apart. All these things, And so I just wasn't making, good decisions for myself. And, people are like, well, what about like the people around you? Did people say something? Yeah, of course people said something, especially my husband and other people that loved me. But you brush those off. You tell yourself, well, they don't understand. They can't possibly understand. Instead of taking it as like, oh, wow, they're telling me that there's something wrong because they care about me. But I also want to say, and you could probably speak to this, Cree, is like, that was, again, 10 years ago. And there's been a lot of research about burnout through the World Health Organization and other really reputable institutions that it's, that burnout, like, isn't just a problem of the individual. It isn't just the choices that I was making for myself, but that there are issues within our organizations and in our workplaces, or the ways that we're working, or the barriers to getting good work done that are contributing to burnout. And so we talk about them as like systemic barriers, right? And so I simplify it in my own mind as like you can't outrun a bad diet, right? Like you can only self-care your way out of so much, but if you're in an environment that is kind of constantly, like, hitting you over the head with a hammer, whether it's intended or not, because most of the time it's not intended. Right. It's really hard to get yourself out of that without some additional help or without a good look at, some of these systemic issues or barriers that exist in our organizations that have existed for a long time. And like I said, aren't ill-intended, but they just don't match the new modern way of working, but we still do it that way because it's the way we've always done it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And what we know to be true is that, sometimes we're in a stressful situation, and to your point, we don't always know that we're in the stressful situation, which is why sometimes we don't recover, and then it leads to burnout. So one of the things that we want to do is hear from you guys. And so if you can take your phones out and use this QR code, we want to know, how often do you feel overwhelmed by stress, just generally speaking? And this can be within the past, month, it can be in the past few weeks, but just how often do you feel overwhelmed by stress? Make sure everybody has it. Is it slow? Yeah. You should connect to the internet, right? All right, let's see. Woo! Look at these numbers. Wow.
There's no nevers.
There's no nevers, exactly. There are no nevers. There are no nevers. Yeah, we have sometimes, we have often, and we have always. Just think about that. Like, all of you in the room, I think what Lori said is that we don't know what one another are going through at any point in time, but this shows you that we're all going through something, right? Like,
except for where are the rarely people?
I know, right?
Do you really exist? Where are you?
And teach us. I'm a psychologist, and even me, I'm just like, I don't have the rarely. So good for you. Like, you're doing something really, really well. But I would say the majority of us are sometimes, often, always, and that's perfectly okay, because stress is something that we don't talk about, but it's actually something that we need. It motivates us to perform. So it's not bad to be stressed at times, right? Like, so I think that sometimes stress gets a bad rap, and it's just like, no, you can only never be stressed. And what we want to tell you is that sometimes there are cases in which just a little bit of stress, a healthy amount of stress, is good for you so that you can be motivated to perform and do what you need to do. So when we think about the rarelies, then it always kind of makes me think, like, what do you mean by that, right? Like, because sometimes we actually do need just a little bit of that in our lives to really get to that performance. So thank you so much for sharing those things. One of the other thing that we wanted to talk about is that sometimes people misinterpret stress for burnout. And it's really important to know the difference because the intervention that you decide to do matters. So if you're trying to treat stress and you do something that is, if you're trying to treat burnout, but you do something that you need to treat for stress, it may not work. And you may be wondering, like, why isn't it working? So you talked about exercising and trying to sleep more. But when we're burned out, we need to do a lot more than that. So chronic stress on your left-hand side, it's physically tolling. It shows up as a physical part of how you're feeling. But there still is some urgency to do something. You have a little bit of motivation to do something. You might feel a little hyperactive as you're doing it, but you definitely have the wherewithal to do it. Your emotions they tend to be a little bit overreactive. So if someone says something to you, and usually in a non-stressful state, you would be able to answer that in a very nice and calm way, you might bite their heads off instead, right? So that happens, right? Exactly. And we all do it. But another thing about stress is that you tend to be over-engaged. And so if you're thinking like, I can't get off my computer until the very end, that might be a sign of over-engagement and stress. Like you can't unplug, when you go on PTO, you can't disconnect. That is over-engagement. Then there's a loss of energy. You're tired, and again, that's that physical component as well. But you also obsess and you ruminate over the incomplete work that you still have to get done. Because a lot of us are box checkers, right? We're like, I did this, I did this, I did this, but oh my gosh, look at this tomorrow's list, or look at next week's list, right? And so you're always obsessing about what you haven't done instead of celebrating what you have done. And then finally, it can manifest as anxiety. So many times people misinterpret stress for having anxiety, and if you would just get recovery from stress, your anxiety may reduce. But we have a lot of high performers that have a lot of anxiety, and it's called high-performing anxiety. But burnout, on the other hand, is much different. It presents differently. So when we think about burnout, this is more of an emotional component, and you feel it. Like you feel it in your soul. Like you feel drained, but you also have a sense of helplessness, and you feel hopeless. Like things will never get better, and you're not even sure what the path to recovery is. You might also be a little blunted, meaning that there's some apathy going on where, you're just like, I'll get to that when I get to that, or that's no big deal. You're disengaged. So while work on the stress side is like, oh, I'm really, really worried about it and I want to make sure I'm doing well, there's a sense of disengagement where you might just kind of feel negative emotions towards it and may not even do anything. So your performance starts to drop off a little bit. You get a loss of motivation. So you look at your to-do calendar and you just don't want to do it. You're like, I don't know. And then finally, when we think about just being detached from work, there's a sense of feeling a little bit of depression. And so many times people can, when you notice that you're starting to feel sad about opening up your computer or walking in the door of your job, that could be that you are feeling burnt out. And so it's so important to know the difference between stress and burnout because, again, the intervention matters. You can't just take time off for a few days or take PTO to treat burnout. There's a lot more that goes into it than just that. But whereas stress, you might be able to do some things, change a few things in your life to adjust to stress and recover from stress. And we're going to talk about some of those things on both sides.
Yeah, and I think we both felt that it was really important to put this side by side because there's a lot of talk about burnout right now in the workplace and just larger in society, and for very good reason. And there are definitely the rates of true burnout have significantly increased amongst the workforce globally. But I think as colleagues and as leaders, understanding that not everything is burnout, even though we might call it burnout, but understanding that there's difference between chronic stress and burnout, because as a colleague, as a friend, as a leader, as a partner, you can help support in very different ways if you can understand, okay, is this actual burnout or trending towards actual burnout? Because chronic stress untreated becomes burnout. But chronic stress treated, you can actually see, some pretty good results in a short period of time. And so we thought that it was really important to help demystify that a little bit, because just in society we tend to use words as a blanket to cover like everything that's going on.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's so many books out about burnout now that everyone's like, oh, I'm burned out, and really it might just be chronic stress or just stress in general. So I do think that it's important to know the difference. So Jen, I'm curious, how did your experience with burnout change you as a leader?
Oh, in many ways. I mean, I think, first of all, it sensitized me to the fact that burnout is real. I mean, and I think even today there's a lot of people that still question whether burnout is real. And even though there's a World Health Organization designation and definition of burnout, there isn't a medical diagnosis. Often if you're burnt out, to your point, you're diagnosed, if you seek clinical help, you're diagnosed with depression or anxiety, and those are common symptoms when you are burnt out, or common experiences. And so I think, first of all, it just was like, oh wait, there's like this whole thing, like this whole burnout thing is actually real, and we're all susceptible to it. But I also think that prior to my own experience with burnout, I was very much a taskmaster. I had a mindset of, we come to work, we get paid to do a job, we're not here to, like hang out and have fun and be friends. And so, tasks came to me, tasks went to my team. Like I didn't have time to for the niceties. And that changed significantly after burnout, because what I realized in many ways is like that's not sustainable. And also, nobody wants to work for you if you behave like that. Like you're a terrible boss and a terrible leader. But I think through my own journey, and then just, becoming really passionate about this topic and this space, learning that, understanding how to, like, what makes other people tick, the people that work for you and with you, spending the time to get to know them, spending the time to get to know, like, what stresses them out, what triggers them, what excites them, what motivates them. For me, that's like the most rich data that you can have as a leader. And I never took the time to actually figure that out. And it is my number one role above everything else to help the people that work with me and for me to reach their highest potential, or to reach their goals, not just to get tasks done. Because if somebody is performing well in the workplace, they're going to get their tasks done, right? Like, so I didn't need to be this taskmaster. I didn't need to be this hard charging, like, we hire professionals. We hire really smart people. They're going to do their jobs. Yeah. But that human element was really like missing from the way that I thought about work and leadership. And so that really changed after burnout.
Yeah. And I met Jen after burnout, so I didn't get to see the other part. I don't know that part of Jen, which is why we're still friends to this day, right? So in your book,
there's some people at Deloitte that can tell you stories.
That's okay. We forgive Jen. So in your book, Work Better Together, you talk about the various teams that you encounter in the workplace. And so how do you think connection, or maybe even the lack thereof, influences the risk of burnout based on the teams, the various teams that you talk about in your book?
Yeah, absolutely. And so hopefully everybody will grab a copy of the book after this session, or download it, or listen to it. But it is called Work Better Together. And the main premise of the book, like we talked about, was relationships in the workplace, and why they're so important for human health and well-being, human thriving, but also why they have such a, like, the lack of relationships in the workplace have a significant negative impact on the bottom line. And there's a ton of research that we dive into in the book, but kind of the main piece of the book is, this diagnostic that we did of team cultures, which is what you see on the slide here. And we had a little bit of fun with it because that was also the premise of the book. Like, you gotta have fun at work, right? Or otherwise, what are you doing? And so we came up with these 4 areas. And so, like any good management consultant, we put it in a 2x2. And so low relationship value, low well-being, high relationship value, high well-being. And so I'll start at the top left. Yeah, School of Sharks. And so the School of Sharks, kind of the dynamic of a School of Sharks in terms of a team environment, is what you think it would be when you think about a School of Sharks. There are relationships, there's high relationship value, but the relationships are much like Jen was. They're very transactional. They serve a purpose to get work done. They're kind of void of any authentic care or humanity. There's a ton of competition, which actually really, when you work in a really, really kind of almost toxic competitive environment, that impedes, genuine relationships and genuine support. And as Cree was talking about before, these are typically like team or organizational cultures because there's such an emphasis put on constant, continuous, unsustainable high performance. It's a really high burnout culture, and typically the people that benefit are the top sharks and a few of the pilot fish that are hanging around with them, but everybody else tends to suffer over time. And then I'm going to move to the lone leopards, which diagonally down on the bottom right. And lone leopards, this isn't necessarily bad because there are some work environments or types of work that people do that require singular focus, that is not it's not a collaborative type of work. And that's okay for a portion of your work, but anything that is devoid of human connection or relationships or collaboration, the humans suffer because we're wired for connection. And so, individual accomplishments are celebrated more than team accomplishments when you have lone leopards. People take care of themselves, so they have high well-being, but they don't take care of other people because they're singularly focused on what do I need to do to get my job done, and then I can move on to what's next, taking care of myself, taking care of my family. Typically, people are isolated, so if they are struggling, they don't reach out to anyone, and so they continue to kind of suffer in silence. Perhaps the worst one is the doom loop, and that's represented by the opossum. And I have been challenged to say that opossums are really cute, and so while they are really cute, the reason, I don't know that I agree that they're really cute. I mean, it kind of looks like a rat to me, but okay.
They are in the rat family.
But the doom loop is, the reason we chose the opossum is because for anybody that knows anything about opossums, when they feel threatened, they freeze. And so that's their survival mechanism. They shut down, they freeze, they basically like withdraw and hide because that keeps them from being attacked. And so that's what happens in a doom loop. There's lack of support, disconnection, exhaustion. Basically, that's burnout culture like at its worst, and nobody really will thrive in that type of culture or that type of team. So as you probably guessed, the dolphin is where we all want to be. And the reason why we call it trusted teams, the reason why we picked a dolphin is because for those of you that know anything about dolphins, they travel in packs, there's strong collaboration, they have fun, they are individually capable, but they're much stronger when they do things together. They kind of, live by the many hands make light work type of thing, and you tend to see very sustainable performance and sustainable workload or shared workload in these dolphin cultures or in these dolphin dynamics. Burnout risk is low because people feel psychologically safe. They can ask for support and help when they need it. And so really the dolphin kind of dynamic is the one that you all want to strive for. That said, none of this is static. Like nobody's like, no team or no culture is a dolphin all the time, because sometimes there's utility in being a shark. Sometimes you need to create dynamics where there's a little bit of oomph or extra motivation. So you do need to create some competition, right? And so you can kind of go back and forth in a healthy way, except for doom loop. You can kind of go back and forth in a healthy way between some of these quadrants, but the real kind of focus is that you want to embody or have most of the time, in your team environments, embodying what the dolphin embodies, because that is really where high performance, good relationships, and good individual and collective well-being lies.
Yeah, that's awesome. So hopefully everyone has an idea of those 4 quadrants, because of course we're going to ask you to let us know, sorry about that, what type of team do you feel most aligns with your current work environment? Let's see what everyone says. We should see all dolphins, right?
If we see all dolphins, we're going to come work for all these people.
I know, right? That's right. It's anonymous, you guys, so you can tell the truth.
I feel like I don't see that side of the room.
Yeah, I have to look.
Yeah.
All right.
Do we have 40 more minutes of content?
We're gonna just give them like at least 10 minutes to do that activity. Oh, did it go down? Oops.
You guys crashed the system?
There you go. Oh, that's the other one. Oh, well. Oh, I don't know why it's not showing up. That's okay. Well, I guess maybe what we can do is
If you feel comfortable,
if you feel comfortable, a show of hands. So if you feel comfortable, and again, if you don't, it's okay. But Jen, do you want to go through?
Yeah. How many of you feel like you more often than not, I'll use that language, work in a school of sharks? Okay. We got a few, which means there's probably more.
Some over there too.
How about my lone leopards? Doing individually focused work, not a lot of collaboration.
Some silos, yeah.
Yeah. Doom loop? No one's going to admit to that. I got it. Dolphins. All right, this is pretty good.
Yeah.
We got some good dolphins. That's great.
That's good, yeah. No, I mean, and what Jen was saying is that there's going to be times in which you're going to kind of go in the different areas amongst the 4 areas, but hopefully you'll maintain the dolphins more often than not. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being vulnerable. Again, this is psychologically safe
Back up there.
space.
Do we want to have them try it again or moving on?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's okay. It's okay. Technology doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. So one of the things that in my own journey, when I had breast cancer, connection became something that I kind of had to do. I felt forced to do in order to really recover and get on the other side of what I consider to be embodied health, and not just, showing up as, oh, I'm okay. And so I started really getting more connected first to others. Like it took me some time. I've never been the type of person to really ask for help. My mom is very headstrong. She has 2 businesses. She went to dental school when I was like 8 years old. And so she's just always been on the grind, and she's always been a person who takes care of herself. And so I was kind of taught to do the same. So asking for help wasn't a part of who I was. And so I had to learn connection through asking for help when I had breast cancer. And then the other thing that happened when I had breast cancer is that I had to learn more about myself. I mean, as you probably can attest to, there are many sleepless nights, and you're kind of like up in the middle of the night while everyone else is asleep, and your mind is like, running and racing and things of that sort. So I started reading all of the books I could on just how to find inner peace and how to be present and how to really learn how to be more self-aware.
You were much better than I read like WebMD and all of the things I shouldn't.
You were in the doom loop.
I was in the doom
You were in
loop.
the
I
doom
read all
loop.
the things that they tell you not to read and just started diagnosing all these other things that I had.
I know. I think the reason why is because like my husband is not like the most emotional person, so I kind of had to figure this out for myself. And I was just like, okay, I need to figure out how to get better. And I did join, like you told me about the Young Survivors Coalition, and so I joined them here in Atlanta. But I also had a 2-year-old at the time. Like my daughter was only 2. And so for me, I had this strong will to live. And I wanted to not just live, I wanted to thrive in how I showed up for her. And so she was really the biggest motivator that I had when it came to surviving and thriving through breast cancer. And so connection became something very important to me. And I started doing a lot of different studies. And as I ended up leaving Deloitte, and then I went and started my own business. Connection has become like almost the center and the showcase of my business. Because what I really do find is that when I'm doing executive coaching, most of the time what has happened is that people are just completely disconnected. Like no one is intentionally being, the worst manager or the worst leader in the world. It is because they are either disconnected to themselves or they're disconnected to their team and those around them. And so what I started to do is start to study, like, what does that look like? What are the variables that make up connection to self and connection to others? And as I started to study that, I realized that there is an entryway to connection to self, and then there's this higher level to connection to self. And so I kind of parsed those two things out and called it the other, connection to higher consciousness. And so hopefully, everyone in the audience had an opportunity to take the Integrated Connection Index, which is what I developed based on all of my research. And I'm writing a book about it because I do think that many times what people forget is that we do, as humans, all need connection. Even our introverts who say, like, I know I just want to be by myself. At some point in time, you do need to feel connected to something because that's how we were created. We're all looking for our tribe, and we're all trying to find ways to really, stay connected to one another. So connection has been the epicenter of just inner peace for myself, but fulfillment. And it really has helped me to reduce stress so that I don't get to that stage of burnout. And so one of the things that I would say is that when you're thinking about how stress and how burnout manifests for you, where does that break down? And hopefully you when you took it, you were able to kind of read through your results to understand how that showed up for you. So Jen, of course, I'm going to ask you.
I'm the guinea pig for everything today.
Of course you are. So when you think about, your path to recovery and the breakthroughing of burnout, what were your steps? What steps did you take to start your journey to healing?
I mean, I think the first one was admitting that there was something wrong, admitting to myself and others, that I was struggling and that I did need help, and seeking out that help that I needed, not only from, the clinical, from the psychologist, but what was my support system? Because in many ways, my support system had fallen away because I never had time for them, or if I had time for them, I wasn't present. And so, like, who wanted to hang out with me? They were like, Jen's always on her phone, or, a million miles away, or, and so I had to really do the work of like reconnecting with my support system and asking them, to support me and to be there for me, and explaining, what that looked like for me, or what I needed from them. And I think that that's a really important thing when you're asking for help of like any kind. And this was true when I was going through my cancer journey as well. And I'm really passionate about this, but like when you're asking, like, people want to help. Like, we all genuinely want to help other people. If somebody comes, but I think sometimes we don't know how to help other
That's right.
people. And especially if somebody is struggling with something that we don't understand or that we haven't been through ourselves, we don't know what kind of support. And so we don't want to make things worse. And so in our effort to not make things worse, we just kind of go like, oh, well, they'll reach out if they need something.
I had people say, well, if you need something, just reach out to
Yeah.
me. And I'm like, I'm never going to do that.
Yeah,
So.
and so that kind of makes you that kind of makes you feel really alone. And so I had to get very specific, and I did learn this through therapy and stuff. That like, okay, this is like I'm asking for your support, and this is actually what I need you to do. This is what I need from you, and getting very clear what I needed from other people, or what I needed them to do, or if I just needed them to be there and to pick up the phone at 3 a.m. when I was having a massive anxiety attack, right? And so it was that. It was reorganizing my life, or said differently, kind of reprioritizing the role that work played in my life, so that I could actually show up and perform the work that I wanted to do and that I was hired to do. Because prior to that, I wasn't performing well, and I was also miserable. And so reprioritizing that, and I think that that's really important for the time that we're in now, because I think a lot of people, especially because of the pandemic, if you're anything like me during the pandemic, work was my coping mechanism, because it was the only thing I felt like I could control. So my laptop was always there. I could always send another email. There was always one more slide deck to work on. Like, there was always something to do, and it felt like it was in my control. And so I think we are kind of still like peeling our way back from that and trying to figure out like, what's the role that work plays in our life? Not because work is bad, but because work should be, like, I always have rejected work-life balance, because it's never a balance. I kind of moved towards work-life integration. I don't know what you call it, but work should be a meaningful part of an overall thriving life. It shouldn't compete with other parts of your life. It's, and it certainly is not more important, or said differently, is as important to other parts of your life. And so figuring out, what was that role that work played in my life? How much was I going to give? And how much did I need to give to myself and to give to the other people in my life that mattered? And that's really, 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 like, I might be making it sound simple. I'm not sure, but it was really hard work.
Yeah. No, it is. It is
Because you have
really
to get
hard.
real with, like, what are the things that I'm doing? Because most of the time it's not really other people, unless the environment that you're in is very toxic.
Yeah.
Most of the time it's, your own behaviors, and your own ability to set boundaries and ask for the help that you need.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that for me too, it was reprioritizing what's most important. And I think my identity at the time was tied up in being Dr. Cree Scott, or being whoever I needed to be at work. And then I had to kind of flip that and say, like, I definitely think that for me, work was always going to be important, because even when I resigned from Deloitte, I was supposed to take, I was supposed to take 3 months off when I resigned. And I was like, oh my gosh, after 3 weeks, I was so bored, you guys. Like, I was like, I just can't do this. I don't even know why I asked for 3 months. So I did find other things to do. So I recognize that I am someone who needs to be doing something, but I don't have to do it to the point of stress and burnout. Like, it's okay to engage without over engaging in something. And that is something that I continue to work towards, because you can still, having your own business, to any entrepreneurs in the audience, like, we know that you play every single role in an organization of your business. And so you can over-engage. But I think now it's more from a fun perspective. And when I do need to shut off, I do shut off. And I think that having that control to do that, I think, is the most important thing. So of course, Jen took the ICI as well. So we're gonna like read her right now for a second. But I say that, playfully, because one of the things that I want to be very clear about for the ICI is that it is truly just information. And it's information for a point in time. So you could take this next week and you might feel a deeper connection in some areas or a lesser connection in other areas. So it really is meant to be a map, if you will, a journey for you to decide, where do I want to focus based on your current goals? So for example, if social intelligence is something that is just, lower on your scale, if social intelligence is not your goal, then maybe you work on something else that is lower. So what I want to, really call out is that this is not meant to be judgmental for yourself. This is truly a data, just some data that you take so that you can start to think about, what do I want to do with this information? Where do I want to go with the information? How can I make very impactful change based on this information? And I want you to be compassionate with yourselves, because sometimes you take these assessments and you're like, I need to take this again. This isn't right. Like, I don't agree with this information, right? But you answered it, so.
Was I the only one that got a pop-up that said, be honest, like you're lying?
No, everybody got that. Everybody got the same pop-up.
And I was like,
I know. Everyone tells me that. They're just like, Cree, why do you have
How does
that
she
in
know?
there? I know. I'm like, I'm a mind reader. But obviously, it's a psychological thing for you to like really focus, to say like, am I really thinking about this seriously? So, but for Jen, she agreed to share her results with everyone. And so I'll talk through them. I won't show them and broadcast them up so people can't take them later. But the idea is that there's three main areas, as you can see, is connection to self, connection to others, and connection to higher consciousness. And so for Jen, you're really like deeply connected when it comes to self-understanding. So the great thing is that you truly understand why you do the things that you do and what drives your behavior. And I think that that is a great first step, because until you can really understand why you're doing something, you really can't do anything about it. And then for your other two, which is self-awareness and self-worth, you're moderately connected. So it doesn't mean that, you are, it doesn't mean that you don't have self-awareness or self-worth. It just means that there's still some room for you to decide if that's something that's important to you, for you to keep going.
is it accurate to say that like during times of stress, where it's probably most important to have self-awareness around how our own behaviors are impacting others, that tends to, like, that's kind of was my thinking process when I was answering it, is like, I think I'm like, when I'm feeling great and doing well, like I'm very self-aware of my own actions and behaviors and how they impact others. But the second I get stressed, I slide right back into that taskmaster.
Yes.
Like, I don't have time for this, just get it done, and I don't really care how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is normal, and we talked about it, when you're stressed, you tend to overreact to things, and because your logical part of your brain isn't working. So if you're stressed, please don't make really big decisions, because what happens is that your irrational brain is on and your rational brain is off. So you really do need to, be careful about making those really big decisions. If you're feeling a high level of stress, you should really figure out ways to breathe, like Lori had us doing earlier, so that we can, calm down and get into our rational mind.
And then self-worth. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, but yeah, it's an issue. That's all I have to say about that.
We're all works in progress. Again, self-compassion, remember that. So the next one is connection to others. And so when it comes to benevolence, you are deeply connected, which means that you truly understand how to be kind and empathetic and all the gracious things that we would, that keeps us friends, basically. And then in terms of allyship, I've always said this, like, Jen has been one of my biggest allies. She uses her platform to uplift me and those around her. So allyship and advocating for others is definitely something where she's deeply connected, is in her wheelhouse. I think right now it's just who you are inherently. You're always trying to, bring people along for the journey. And I think that that's really, inherent in who you are now. The third is social intelligence, and that's moderately connected. Again, it's not low, it's at a moderate level. And so when we think about social intelligence, it's really understanding like other people's emotions, how you show up and how other people perceive you, being able to respond to contentious situations, being able to diffuse things when emotions run high and still maintain that collegial or friendly vibe, if you will. And so what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate. I would say that that's probably the area where I just need continual focus. I think there's times where, depending on what's going on in my own world and my own life, I'm probably better at it, and times where, but for me, I think that that's just an area that I will always need to and strive to improve in, because I think especially in our increasingly digital world, and as somebody who does have high performance anxiety, or I talk about myself as like a recovering perfectionist, the way we receive, digital communications and how we react to those digital communications, digital communications in one way is really great because it allows us to communicate with each other all the time, which is also bad. But, somebody might say something and I react from the emotional state that I'm in and not how they might have intended, And so I always just try to kind of check myself to say, am I reacting because the emotional state I'm in, or do I truly not understand what they mean by this or what their intention is? And, some people put in the bottom of their email, like, assume positive intent. To me, it's just like, pick up the phone. Like, if I'm having a reaction that is not a positive one, don't, like, this loop that we get in, if you're replying to the message for the 17th time, you're wasting your time and your emotional energy, and the other person's probably frustrated.
Yes.
Like, why aren't we just talking to each other? So but then it's kind of, I am an introvert, so then it's kind of like, oh, I gotta pick up the phone and talk to somebody. I really just rather solve this by email. So I think it's a little bit of that, like that kind of like constant battle that I have with myself.
Yeah, well, I consider myself to be highly social intelligent, but through text message, I'm not. And I know a lot of like my younger cousins and just younger people in general. My younger cousin will send me like a paragraph of text message, and I'm like, I don't even understand what she wants me to do with this, and so like I become very socially unintelligent at that point.
Yeah.
So, and I think that that's what's happening to our children, because that's the only way that they communicate with one another is like on the phone, on text or on, the computer games and things of that sort, but they could be sitting right next to each other and text one another instead of like talk to each other. It's just really weird. I've seen it happen. But I digress. So going back to your results.
Was that a socially intelligent comment?
I know, right? Exactly. Exactly. So connection to higher consciousness. So this is supersensory awareness, which you deeply are. So that's about your intuition, understanding that there are things in this world much bigger than us and that we're just a small little peg in this world, and that you can see the grand scheme of life without it feeling so minute based on who you are. And so that's deeply connected. Meaning and fulfillment, you're deeply connected. And I would assume, in these past few months, you've been able to even get there more, because it's something now that you're just like, now I get to do what I want to do, and you get to do the things that really bring fulfillment to you. Growth is deeply connected for you, so you're always learning. You understand that life is about a continuous journey of growth and learning, and that we never stop learning no matter how old we are. There's always room for us to really think about improving. And then finally, mindfulness. So mindfulness was moderately connected. Again, it's not anything that was low, but it was just in a moderate level. And so when we think about mindfulness, this is really being able, for someone with, who is a high performing, social, intelligent, and has some level of anxiety, right? Like, these are the things in which we want, we have to relinquish control. That's what mindfulness is really about. And so I know that both of us suffer from wanting to be in control all the time. And so mindfulness is about really being able to adjust to new situations and change and being grateful and being able to think about things in a very hopeful way despite the challenges that you're dealing with right at that moment. But it's really also about just knowing that everything is going to be okay. It's like moving with the understanding that it's going to work itself out. So, and that's something that I would say is the biggest part of from the ICI, that you have to practice that every single day. Like if you just, if you kind of let that slide just for even like a few days, you might find that you kind of start to become less connected in that way. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. What I have found is that, even just having like a positive affirmation app or something, or just a practice or a ritual to remind me of how I need to be thinking is really important. So what about you?
I wear my Taylor Swift bracelets that say strong AF.
That's right.
And I choose hope.
That's right. I love it. So we're going to get into an audience activity, and I know there's quite a few of us. So if, at your tables, definitely work at your tables. If you're on the side, work with a partner or a few people together. But we want to hear from you because we can, give you all the answers about like, what do you do when you're stressed? What do you do when you're burning out? But you know what works best for you. So what we would love for you to do, I don't know why I did this. I don't want this to happen this way. What we want you to do is at your tables, brainstorm ways to build, how you can build connection in those three areas. So connection to self, connection to others, and connection to a higher consciousness to really, impactfully deal with burnout. And so I want you to consider these questions here. So how can we reconnect with ourselves to recharge and reflect? What are some ways we can strengthen relationships? And how can we connect to purpose and meaning more often? I know these are hard questions for you to be thinking about this early in the morning, but just give it your best shot. Have a conversation. We'll come back to you shortly, and we'll ask for some volunteers if you're willing. But again, if you're not willing to be vulnerable, it's perfectly okay. We'll keep going. It's okay. So we have the answers.
We have some answers.
I know, we have some answers, exactly. How much time do we have?
I think we only have 13 minutes left.
Oh, wow, so I talked way.
think our mics are off, so they can't
I think
hear
they
us.
are.
Yeah.
We might have to stand up. All right. I know we can probably talk a lot. If I can have your attention, please. I'm like, clap once if you can hear me. All right, so what I would love to do is hear from a few of you, if you're willing to share, just, in one of the 3 areas, whatever you talked about, what were some things that you came up with at your tables in terms of how you really think about building connection in these 3 areas? Is anyone willing to share? We were too busy getting to know each other. That's okay.
Okay, that's okay.
That is connection. We have one person over here. Oh, we have another. Okay, so we'll come to you next.
Hi, Amber Parker, here with my Swiss Free family. And one idea that we had related to this question is letting our no basically be no and then being okay with it. Because sometimes, especially we as women, I know that we are really apt to say yes, whether we want to or not. And so just being comfortable with saying no.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yes,
No
setting
is a
boundaries.
No is a complete sentence.
Yes. But many times we don't do that because the reason why women are more stressed than men are is because we are juggling everything. We are the caregivers. We take care of the household. We take care of our families. We take care of the workplace, and we become the nurturers for everyone. And so we tend to share a lot of ourselves, but we don't always pour back into ourselves. So we tend to get way more stressed. So setting boundaries is the number 1 way that you can reconnect to yourself. And I love that answer. Thank you so much. We had a person over here. I'm sorry. You have I'm sorry.
Okay, and then we have table 13.
Can everyone hear me? So at the table, we discuss different types of activities, but my activity was, as women, we tend to just function, and we can function in high stress environments. And one of the things was getting back to little girl me. So as a grown woman, yes, there are things I like to do that can calm me and give self-care, but what is it little girl me can get back to? And I notice in raising my kids that I encourage little them, but I have to also encourage little me.
Oh, I love that. Yes, I love that. So one of our colleagues talks about play in work, but play in life in general. And so what we find is that many times as we become, as we get older and we're in the workplace, we take ourselves so seriously and we remove play from work.
And
what
even laughter.
And laughter,
we laugh
right?
a lot less as
exactly.
adults.
Yeah, and so what we know is that it's super important that we are infusing play. And similarly to you, my daughter always is getting me to do different things. And I see things differently, the same exact thing that I've seen a million times. But if she talks about it, there is a light, there is some type of lightness to it that I start to even see it differently. And so play and just seeing things through the child's eyes can really, really help with that. So thank you so much for that.
Hi. Yeah. So first at the table, we started talking about sometimes you feel like you need a retreat and kind of think about things and get away and just spend time on your own. But often, if you will actually step out and do something for someone else, whether it's volunteering or helping someone else with an issue or a problem, it really gets you out of all of this ruminating in your head. And when you come back to it, you find it's not as big of an issue as you once thought. Yeah.
There's a great book if anybody's interested in doing more thinking on that. That's called The New Happy, and it's really like that we've been sold this dated version of happiness that doesn't make us happy because we're always striving. And the new happy is really about the way to happiness is through helping others.
Yeah, I love that.
Hi, Kendra Johnson at Coca-Cola. Our table didn't really solution at all. We just created the space to connect on that. This is
I
a
love
shared
it.
experience. And I think the learning from this was that, as you mentioned, a lot of people just don't recognize that they're experiencing it. So a first step would be just creating that space to recognize it and having a transparent conversation.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I would say, in order to get to that space of recognizing it, we have to slow down. When we're in that go, go, go mode, you miss it. You're gonna miss it. So it's just like asking a fish about how's the water. They're gonna say, what water? I don't. There's no water. So it's the same thing. It's like if we're constantly moving and that's the environment that we find ourselves in and we're so used to it, we become habituated to it and we don't pay attention. So you have to kind of slow down and really start to give yourself just a little bit of unstructured time in the day, take those breaks and recover so that you can reflect and introspect on your day or just what's upcoming and things of that sort. So I think there's
one over
over
there.
here.
Yeah. That'll be our last one, I think.
Yeah, I guess we only have like 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Hi. So something interesting, and everybody knows, is we all had different ways to recharge and reconnect. So what worked for them, which is great, didn't work or doesn't work for me. Something that I want to share, I don't know if I'm the only one, and let me know if I am, but I have found that what used to recharge me a few years ago, it doesn't recharge me now. So I was sharing with these beautiful ladies that I am in that journey of rediscovering what recharges me. So 2 things I know for sure. And one is that I love my kids and my husband, but they drain me to... That sounds terrible.
Hallelujah.
They drain my energy. I'm constantly busy thinking about them and everything. So it gets to a point that when I am drained, so for me to recharge, I need to be away from them.
Yes.
So that is something that I have found. The other one is just watching a movie and a glass of wine, just being by myself. It can be, and it has to be a silly movie so my brain is not thinking.
Yeah.
So any silly movies, just put it on and a glass of wine. I don't know about anything else because, again, I'm in that journey of rediscovering. But, yeah, I guess,
great.
I don't know
That's
if I'm the only one.
awesome. But there's a joy in rediscovering, right? Like it should be fun. It should be an experiment. And you're very right. Like the things that, brought you joy at one point in time, you evolve over time and then you start to figure out what the next thing is. So there's nothing wrong with, being able to kind of think more holistically about that. And I'm right there with you. Like for Mother's Day, they were like, what do you want to do? And I was just like, I want to go to a hotel room by myself and enjoy the day. So we actually did that. So I do think that sometimes you have to know, and I'm an extrovert, so I love people. But of course, when you're an extrovert, even though you get your energy from people, sometimes it can also be just as draining. By the end of the day, I'm like, I'm so tired. And so my job is to talk to people all day. So at some point in time, you have to kind of figure out that there is other things that you can be doing. So I'm not going to go through all of these. You can read them, take pictures, but everything that you talked about are ways to really get back in touch with who you are, what you need, and how to connect to yourself, to others, and a higher consciousness. And so we'll be over here later at lunch. We'll be around. If you have questions or you want to talk about anything, we are here to serve you. And we are so excited that you had us here. And we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for everything. And I think there's a connect with us.
Oh, here's how to connect with us.
If you want to connect with us, that'll take you to our LinkedIn. And I think we'd love to see you on there. So thanks for everything.